Goodbye livable weather. The planet is about to pass a threshold within the next decade or so that scientists have been warning us about for 20, 30 years now. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Out here on the left coast where the sky is orange or brown or futzy or kind of golden, actually. It's a very, very strange color. Not normal. And we're finding that the levels of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere right now compared to pre-industrial revolution, around the time of the American Revolution, are 147% up for carbon dioxide, 259% up for methane, that's almost tripled, and 123% higher for nitrous oxide. What does this mean, and where are we going with this? Dr. Michael Mann is on the line with us, the Distinguished Professor of Meteorology, the Director of the Earth Systems Science Center at Penn State University, member of the National Academy of Sciences, author of numerous books, his most recent, The Madhouse Effect, How Climate Change is Threatening Our Planet, Destroying Our Politics, and Driving Us Crazy, and the recipient of the Tyler Prize. Professor Mann, welcome back to the program, or Dr. Mann. It's always great having you on. Tell us how, and I'm seeing this report here that says that we might hit that 1.5 degree level that the IPCC said, don't go there, don't go above that. We might hit that as early as 2024. Am I reading that right?
Yeah. Hi, Tom. It's good to be with you as always. And there's a lot going on here. And the scenes that you described and that I've seen, playing out in California, we see on our television screens, the whole West Coast is essentially on fire. The skies, as you note, are orange, red, yellow colors they're not supposed to be. And this is disturbingly reminiscent for me of my experience just some months earlier this year when I was doing a sabbatical in Sydney, Australia. And whether you're Sydney, Australia or California, climate change is here. This is the face of climate change. It's not a far off threat. It's leading to extreme weather events and disasters like we're seeing right now along the West Coast, as we also have seen an extremely busy and devastating Atlantic hurricane season here in the East that's likely to get even worse. So the problem's getting worse. As you note, this latest report, carbon dioxide concentrations continue to rise. And they will continue to rise as long as we emit carbon into the atmosphere. And there's sort of a misunderstanding that's fairly widespread here when it comes to the difference between the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere and our carbon emissions. So our carbon emissions have actually gone down about 4 or 5% this year. That's a good thing. But until we bring them down to zero, CO2 levels will continue to rise. It's sort of like the faucet in your sink, and you've got a tub of water. As long as the faucet is on, the water level is going to rise. The water level is our CO2 concentrations. The faucet is our carbon emissions, and we've got to bring them down to zero. Now, you also asked about these dangerous thresholds that we are going to cross in the near future. If we don't bring our carbon emissions down by a factor of 2 within the next decade, then it will be very difficult to keep carbon dioxide levels below the levels that commit us to more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, about a little under 3 degrees Fahrenheit warming. And that threshold will be crossed most likely a little bit later than what this recent report, the WMO report, claimed. They said, by 2030. And that reflects a bit of a misunderstanding between sort of the rates of temperature change from year to year and sort of the longer term warming trend, because the temperatures fluctuate quite a bit from year to year, or even from one 5-year period to another because of natural events like El Nino or volcanic eruptions. And so we measure the trend over, a decade or 2 decades or longer. And that trend right now is about 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade. We're at about 1.2 Celsius. Your viewers can do the math if they like. But what that means is that we will cross the 1.5 degree Celsius, nearly 3 degree Fahrenheit threshold, about 2035 at the continued, at the rate that we're warming right now. So it's not quite as bad as the report made it sound. The report says 2030. It's more like 2035. But, we're haggling over 5 years. Regardless of how you look at it, this is an unfolding crisis that will continue to get worse if we don't do something and do something immediately.
Yeah, back a decade ago when I used to actually be willing to debate these climate-denying fools like Mark Morano,
Didn't we all?
Actually, yeah, he used to come on the program fairly regularly, and I would point out, or he would point out, he would say, hey, our carbon dioxide levels right now are more than 100% what they were 200 years ago, and the weather's not that different. Why are you so upset? And my response was always, I think that, it's like an ocean liner. I mean, the atmosphere, the entire planet is this huge, massive thing. And,
Right.
You make these changes, and it takes a while for those changes to filter into every dimension, every ecosystem, particularly the ones that are going to add on to the change that's already happening. And we're seeing that right. I believe, I'd love to get your take on this. I believe we're seeing this right now. Over the last decade, these forests up and down the West Coast have been drying out because of climate change. Yep. While it didn't immediately burst into flames, it took a decade for all the trees to dry out and many of them to die off so that they're now tinder. And then that is going to be throwing more particulate matter into the atmosphere, and it's going to reduce the number of trees that are cycling carbon back into that. Right. And there's the same thing with the peat, with the permafrost up in the northern climates. It takes a while for it to thaw out, but once it thaws out, all hell breaks loose. Or do I have that wrong?
No, you've got it right. We are the Titanic. We are this huge ocean liner, and we've got to steer away from this iceberg that is getting closer and closer. And just as the Titanic found it couldn't steer fast enough to avoid it, that's the problem that we will face if we don't steer away from the iceberg immediately, which means to, ramp down our carbon emissions. There are sort of what we call threshold responses here. Sometimes we call them tipping points. And, the melting of the ice sheets is one of the tipping points we worry about. If we melt, if we warm the planet up enough, then we can't stop the collapse of the West Arctic and Greenland ice sheet. And we get, literally tens of feet of sea level rise, meters of sea level rise. And, in this case, there may also be a threshold when it comes to wildfires. There's some, indication now that once you raise temperatures enough and you dry things out enough, you get qualitatively different types of wildfires. Wildfires that burn much hotter, spread much faster, cover much wider areas. And you hear firefighters now. We heard this down in Australia saying, we have never seen fires like this during, the Black Summer, we're calling it, last summer in Australia when the entire continent caught fire, essentially. The firefighters were saying, we've never seen fires like this that spread so quickly, that burn this intensely. We don't know how to combat them. They are far more deadly to combat. That's what we're seeing now. So, we've warmed up, the planet enough. We've dried out the subtropics, which is one of the predictions that climate models made decades ago. We'll make it hotter, we'll make it drier in places like California and Australia. You put those two things together, you get worse wildfires. But once it gets hot enough and dry enough, and that's where we are, that's the territory we're moving into, you get qualitatively worse, unprecedented wildfires that are like nothing we've seen before. And we're now looking at 2.5 million acres burned in California alone. Right now, burning in California are the second, third, and fourth largest wildfire on record. The first being Camp Fire 2 years ago. That happened in the winter, not even the dry season.